Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. And this is another edition of the Democratic Labour Party's Front House Show. And today is a very special show for us because we are celebrating International Human Rights Day. This is a special Human Rights Day because it's the 75th anniversary of the Declaration, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. So yay for that. And today we'll be having a special human rights discussion with members of historically marginalized communities in Barbados. We have a representative from the transgendered community, Miss Alexa Hoffman. We also have Mr. Errol Hurley, who is a person living with a disability. His disability is that he is blind. He's also proudly a former second vice president of the NUPW. We also have with us Miss Melissa Savory Gittins, who is Mayo Borella, who is a member of the Rastafari community and is the vice president of the Barbados Youth Action Program. Thank you all for joining us today. So we will start. The theme of this year's International Human Rights Day, as set by the United Nations, is freedom, equality, and justice for all. As a primer to this discussion, let's refresh ourselves on what are human rights, as shown on the screen above. So what are human rights? Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. Human rights include the right to liberty, the right to life, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, and many more. Everyone is entitled to these rights without discrimination. In Barbados, in the context of Barbados, where can we find our human rights? The first place you can look for your human rights protections are in the Constitution of Barbados, specifically Chapter 3, the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms. Here you will find protections such as freedom from slavery, inhumane treatment, freedom of expression, and other human rights. I want to encourage every Barbadian citizen to have a look at their constitution and to know your rights. Additionally, we have pieces of legislation passed by the Parliament of Barbados that goes towards protecting human rights. For example, the Domestic Violence and Protection Orders Act, which protects victims of domestic violence by allowing persons in our circumstance, predominantly women, to have the ability to have a protection order made against men who are committing domestic abuse against them. Additionally, we have the Employment Rights Act, which protects employees from discrimination in the course of their employment. And beyond the domestic sources of protections, we have international sources for human rights protections. This was born out of the genesis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and now we have 9 core human rights treaties, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which I think is the most well-known human rights treaty. And the most recently passed human rights treaty is the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is very, very important for the persons living with disabilities and is one of the most progressive international human rights treaties. Additionally, moving on, we have certain groups in the context of Barbadian society and all over the world, in fact, that are most vulnerable to human rights abuses. In Barbados, this includes members of the Rastafarian community, women, children, persons living with disabilities, LGBTQ plus individuals, religious minorities, racial minorities, and persons living with HIV and AIDS. These groups, in our particular context, need heightened scrutiny around the protection of their rights, and Barbados must strive to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of the individuals belonging to these vulnerable groups. There's so much more I can say. I'm very fascinated by international human rights. It was one of my master's degrees. So I could go on for that length for this, but I will move on. I want to now turn to a short statement. In my capacity as Special Envoy for Human Rights of the President of the Democratic Labour Party, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, and also in my capacity as Secretary of the Young Democrats on this International Human Rights Day. I want to say emphatically that the Democratic Labour Party is an inclusive organization where everyone is welcome without distinction. Any individual who wants to contribute their talents to nation building and the socio-economic and political life of Barbados is welcome within the rank and file of the Democratic Labour Party. The Democratic Labour Party wants to meet you. We are not a party that puts up walls. The Democratic Labour Party has a policy of engaging and embracing the diversity of people's needs in all forms that they take. We understand that at times you may have lost touch with certain communities within this society, but we are working to rebuild relationships across Barbados. We are on a mission under the leadership of Dr. Ron Yearwood to meet in your churches, your mosques, and other places of worship, your homes, your schools, and your offices. The doors of the Democratic Labour Party are open to everyone in Barbados. So whether you be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Rastafari, a person living with disabilities, or racial minority, or LGBTQ+, the DLP George Street headquarters is a place where your concerns will be heard and will be answered. I thank you. So let's open our panel discussion today. I want to turn to everyone on this panel and ask them to specifically describe any challenge they have with the exercise of their human rights based on their status. I will start with Miss Alexa Hoffman, who is a transgendered individual.
I honestly wanted to go last, but fair enough. Yes. Yes, I was saying earlier, I was hoping to be the one to go last, but fair enough. If I'm the first, I'm the first. In my experience, I would say the biggest challenge that I've had is navigating the business and professional world, the world of work, where I know I have certain capabilities, certain competencies, and I've been able to demonstrate them over the years, even since I was a child. But yet still at pretty much the age of 30, I still have situations where people are quick to wonder, you know, if my qualifications really are my qualifications. And sometimes I have to ask myself, well, why do you think that, you know, what I've put on my CV isn't what it is? Especially you can put me to work and see that I can actually walk the walk, talk the talk, I know the know. And of course, as many people would know because I've publicized this, 5 years ago, I had a situation where I was unfairly terminated from my job as a legal assistant. And it was, I'll put it flat this way, it was simply because the boss didn't want to call me by my name. And in spite of the fact that, yes, I was capable and competent and everything, all of that meant nothing. You know, the moment they had to consider the fact that I'm a transgender individual and, you know, I have undergone a social and medical transition, it was just, as they put it, an unresolvable issue. And I know there are many others, not just transgender people, but also other LGBTQ people who even something as simple as being seen arm in arm with their partner in public at a party or something, their heart is in their throats because then they're wondering, what's going to happen to my job after this? And that is really something that any other member of society, don't care what they do, even if it were captured on film and published for the world to see, they'd hardly see a scratch on their CV for that. So to me, that is the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue that I have faced as a transgender individual in Barbados.
Okay. We have Mr. Errol Hurley, a person living with a disability.
Thank you very much. My biggest challenge is that persons with disability see it very hard to get a job. In Barbados, people think that because you have a disability, that you're incapable of doing proper work and work that is to a very high standard. And there are businesses in Barbados that are not equipped for persons with disability to get to and from the office. So they don't employ persons with disability. There are very few businesses in Barbados that have persons with disability. There's one lady who works at the Ministry of Elder Affairs. She has a disability. And there's one who works with the Corporate Affairs Department. But outside of that, you don't have people with disabilities being accepted in the society the way they should. Your own neighbors look at you as if you're the scum of the earth. You know, when I had my vision and I could see, I had a lot of friends. After I lost my vision, I had very few friends, and those were the genuine ones. And people in Barbados would see someone with disability getting off and on the bus or walking through town, and they would say to them, "Why you don't stand home? You have a right, like anybody else in society, to travel to and fro on the streets of this country, and not only on this country, overseas." When I travel alone, going to America or Trinidad. And I travel alone because I know that as a person with a disability, I have a right to travel. And the right of traveling is that there, people are there to look out for you. And that is what we need in Barbados. Or friends, or workers, or government looking out for people, persons with disabilities within this country. And it is a sad state that persons with disability are treated in this country.
Thank you. That's a very moving testimony. Heartbreaking at times, but very moving as well.
Thank you.
We have Melissa David representing Barbados and specifically Democratic Labour Party.
Even say,
A young people, yes. A young people,
young
too.
people. And when you asked the question earlier, I started what should I ask for it? And the first thing that came to my mind was, and one of the biggest challenges I had experienced over time, because people think you're too young to know certain things, so you can't know that, or why would they come for your opinion, or why should they even regard your opinion as something that's knowledgeable because you don't come to town, so you could know something, right? That was one. But then as a woman, I started to reflect on the 16 days of activism has started in on which is actual Human Rights Day. And we started looking at violence against women. And personally, I've never experienced it. But really living on a day-to-day basis and hearing stories, that's not one of the biggest things that women experience. And I think it's because women are supposed to be seen and not heard. Women are supposed to take their place. Women are supposed to be a part of everything but not be in the light. And even as you experience that. I can remember once a man said to me at church, you should never be doing what you were doing. You should never be doing that. I'm like, so why can't I do it? Because you're a woman. So there are so many aspects of female being a woman that women have to face. That this conversation, I can spend the entire just going on and on about the different things people face, and also in the whole aspect of human rights and the 75th year, inclusivity and policy. Yeah, so thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We have Mr. Emmanuel Barilla, a member of the Rastafari community.
Yes. Greetings and thanks to speak on such a colorful topic of human rights. The question is, how would it have affected me as a Rasta? I have to say that the experience in the form of violations as a Rasta, because as Rasta, all right, I deal with the spiritual aspect of life, so I do a couple things in it. But I know for a fact that as Rastafari, that Rastafari has been one of the most marginalized people in the century. And from what happens, Dominica with the back, and but we could bring it close to home, Barbados. You know, here in Barbados, Democratic Party. In fact, the Democratic Party have one is the name of Ian, and a lot of people who've never heard his story, you need to go and look it up. I mean, shout out to his mother and his family who continually fight for his rights. Right here in Barbados. And so speaking of human rights and violations, I think one of the reasons why we even have this conversation in 2023 is because we have to define certain things. And just a quick overview. For example, you know, Barbados being that wonderful place we all love is energy. Is energy. Energy. Yeah, of course, this is a normal thing. What I was saying is that when we look at Barbados 5 years, 5 years ago, we can even go a little. Like it's marveling. So I'm sitting over below signing emancipation. I told you earlier, like what do you ought to have. But prior to emancipation in Barbados, we were considered enslaved. We were here doing work. We wouldn't even considered human. In fact, Barbados had no law that Africans are fifth. Therefore, that justified them treating us like cattle. We had no human rights. Whether you was mentally or physically challenged, you ain't a woman or not, you ain't had no rights. So then on Emancipation Day, they said, look, you guys, we all included now. We all free. But what they didn't do, brother, that wasn't changed. Mindset wasn't changed. So let's fast forward now because I don't want to take too much time. But in 2023, here we are now having to realize that even in Barbados, work regarding challenges with peer and the sister as a woman being marginalized, which does abuse goes right back to meritocracy as well. Unless we deal with this fight at the root of the problem, you will always be here every year discussing violations of human rights. So I'm glad that you focus on this. Not as DLPS's DLP location, but this is a Barbados human thing. Or everybody, folks, but we're gonna get into it more as we go along. Here you
Oh, thank you. That was really good opening segment. I want to pick up some of the hot button issues right now that are floating around the human rights community. I'm going to be turning to Errol Hay. We have inclusivity and participation of persons living with disabilities in general public life, which is massive problem. Persons with physical disabilities are sometimes more able to do that than persons with intellectual and situations in the world of guardianship laws, which violate Article 12, legal capacity of persons living with disabilities. And persons with physical disabilities are oftentimes put under guardianship and they can't participate in public life. This is a complaint we hear all the time in Barbados, and I'm here to emphatically say that participation in public life is more pertain of your children outside of this building. Our disability parking spots, it goes through every top to bottom in participation, true inclusivity, and in the workplace, in settings, in church, in socialization. So, Mr. Hurley, I want to ask you, do you think Barbados is headed in the right direction? And what suggestions do you give to better incorporate persons with disabilities into socio-economic and political life of Barbados?
Well, there is a committee set up that is headed by Mr. Jason, who are looking into the rights of persons with disability. But I was invited to sit on that committee, and I don't pull no punch.
Mm.
I refuse because I don't think they were heading in the right direction that I think they should go. And, I'm a straight up front person. I just tell you as it is. And if you don't like me, I'm sorry for you. Tell it as it is. So I did not want. I think the first thing we have to do is to make sure that persons with disabilities are seated on every board that they have in Barbados. Be it the schools board, the board at national, the board at the insurance corporation. This person with disability should be represented on all of those boards, because you that don't have a disability can't choose for me that have a disability. I have to be able to sit down and put my point before you and argue my point so that it can get over to you to see where I'm coming from. So my major thing is that all statutory boards, well, they had it in the Senate before, but I would love to see a person with a disability in a seat in Parliament. Then we would be able to say persons with disability are being recognized. And the person that has the person who can go into their constituency and let the people of that constituency know, because they might have multiple sclerosis, my senior graphics, or I might be blind, that doesn't mean that I can't represent you properly in the House of Parliament. House of Parliament representation don't mean that you have to be a university graduate with a degree to represent somebody. Representation in the House of Parliament is common sense. And common sense comes, it's always common. Education. You have people that went to not a school like Harrison College and Commonwealth School, like me that went Parkinson University de Pine. And I can represent myself in any sort of forum at all. Because you know why? The training that you had as a child. And then after being in the disabled community, you know, no pun intended, but after I lost my sight, my spiritual eyes open. And I get to see a lot of things that were happening to persons with disability that you never recognize when you have your sight. You know, you overlook certain things that, boy, I can go on. You know, I mean, abuse. They have persons with disability that their family abuse them, beat them, lock them up in the bedroom, don't let them come out, take away the checks, the disability checks, spend them. But they are afraid to go to the police or anyone because the family would abuse them more. And these are things that we have to look into. And this is where the welfare department come into play. And the department that looks after for the elder, gender affairs and elder affairs. They need inspectors or persons that would visit houses, because there is a list of persons with disability at the disability unit. And you can go there and you can get the names of persons and visit them at random and find out how they're living, so that that person's right would not be invaded by someone who wants to take advantage. And you must know that, as the moderator said, it's not just ramps on the road and proper traffic light warning. It is within the household. It is within the government. It is within the working environment that people with disability need to be taken care of. And until that happens, there will be no human rights for people with disability in Barbados.
Very powerful testimony again. Oh, very powerful testimony again. Thank you, Mr. Hurley. I want to return to Elissa Savory Gittins, and I want to pick up on the issue of domestic violence, which is a huge problem in Barbados and the Caribbean, and also persons with disabilities, domestic violence within the home. Do you think domestic violence, how can we begin to change attitudes on the way men view women in Barbados? And do you think that enough focus is given to this issue by the government of Barbados as it stands?
I was going to say that, but so his comment was how women view men sometimes too.
And how,
But
to be
that is not
fair,
for me, 'cause that's not what I'm here to
how
discuss.
women view men as well.
I'm not here representing men tonight. But going back to what I initially said in terms of being overlooked, and I think it's something that it didn't start yesterday. It started way back when. And my grandmother's 94. So obviously we'll hear the stories of what a woman meant to a man then, what a woman means to a man now. I can see it for myself, right? And the stories can date back and go further back. In terms of those same said stories, women are sometimes seen as tools, and your role in the house is to cook and clean and wash and starch and iron, and not to be heard, right? When the men sit down at the table, you go outside. You just come back to check to see if they want something to eat or a drink, but outside of that, you didn't have a role. You bear children, and you took your place as a domestic, like he's saying, right? Today, we still have, although it's not as open as it used to be before, we still have that mentality. And it starts again in the home. Everything that we experience as people come from how we are raised. If you see your mother being beaten by your father, as a male, you may come along, may not, but most of the time you will come along and say to yourself, but that's normal. There's nothing wrong with it. So I can do it too. She needs to understand that I'm the person in charge, and I'll show her that I'm in charge if it means that I have to beat her every day, right? And then some men will also tell the boy children, man, the only way she can know you love she is if you put some licks on she and show she you love she, right? So these are the things that some women experience. On Saturday, when I went around with the National Organization of Women, and we were speaking to women about domestic violence and so on, and I would have heard some stories. One woman said to me, I spent 7 years in an abusive relationship. Teeth get knocked out, all kind of thing. And she still stayed. I said, but why? Why? And I guess for me, it may be hard to understand because I've never been in it, right? And she said, because I figured that was the only thing I could have done. Till eventually she decided if she didn't get out of the relationship, she may have ended up in a casket. And she said she just had to take her children and run. Don't look back, right? So it's hard, like I said, for people out there to understand. And some people, but we should bashing on men. Not bashing on men, but I'm just saying it's how you're raised sometimes. And you see this, right? Sometimes you as a male too, you may not see that, but the people you hang out with may influence you in that way. So man, well, she tell you that man try and get you a cup and she won't next time. And you figure, like I can try it. And you ready to get you a cup and she won't the first time and she buckle and you say, ha, that's a trick. Right. So, women are experiencing these things every day, especially violence. And like I said, a lot of people are afraid to speak out. Men too, they're afraid to speak out because they don't want to be seen as mice, right? And women don't want to speak out because, it's a private issue, it's a personal issue. But the only way sometimes you can get help is by reaching out and speaking out about your situation where somebody can step in and give you the help that you need. But again, starting from the home, parents teaching their children how to teach your boy children, single parents especially, because we have a lot of them. Women, teach your boy children how to love on their mothers. If how you see a man treat his mother, most of the time he treat his woman. Teach your boy children how to love on the women, how to love them, how to show them respect, and you can respect that they want, so that it can continue to generate.
Thank you. I just want to comment briefly. Domestic violence is a form of discrimination against women. It's been held this way by the International Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. And it's one of the hardest human rights issues to tackle because, unlike others, it goes so deeply to the root of the private sphere. So laws and legislation, it's not enough to tackle domestic violence. I want to emphasize that every country in the world has the obligation to prevent, prosecute, and punish domestic violence. The prevention is one of the challenges because that goes to the core of changing societal norms and values and thinkings around women. It's so odd that Barbados is a matrifocal society where women are seen as the head of the household, but domestic violence is still a huge issue. Even though women are seen as leaders of the household, they're still subject to abuse from their male partners. I want to make the call to the government of Barbados to begin implementing programs from primary school to educate persons around gender stereotypes and teaching men to value women and to respect women and to see women as their equal, to realize that girls have the right to education, they're just as smart, just as talented, they deserve the same opportunities in life as boys. I know very much growing up in primary school, there were different, definitive stereotypes that a girl had to play with dollies and make cake and home economics in school. That's one I really hate. But she can't.
Clothing and textiles.
But
Clothing and textiles.
clothing and textiles, but she can't go take technical drawing to enhance her scientific mind and become an engineer or a scientist.
And just to add to that, in terms of, you were saying earlier that although women are seen as the head of the household, that they still have the issues. And it's because they may be the head of the household in terms of running things in the house, but who bring home the bacon? What kind of job he has versus what kind of job you have. Because if you're just getting children all the time and not being able to go there and fully educate yourself where you can get that kind of job where you can control the money, then you may be subject again to that kind of environment. So it boils back down again to education.
You have a lot of work to do on this issue.
Yes.
I'm turning to Mr. Emmanuel Barilla now, a member of the Rastafari community, which is one of the most misunderstood communities in Barbados and throughout the world about what it means to be Rasta. We had the Dread Act, one of the most discriminatory pieces of legislation ever passed throughout the Caribbean region that victimized so many dreadlocked men and Rastafari men. I want to know from you, can you publicly educate us on what it means to be Rasta? And what do you want to see society do to better include Rastas and to make Rastafari a normal, accepted religion? It is a religion, but so many people view it as a fringe cult or sect. I'm here to say it's not. It is a legitimate, credible, and valid religion.
Yeah, that's loaded. Okay, put on your seatbelt. It's gonna be a little ride. Well, first let me say that there are certain aspects of Rastafari as a practice culture that is viewed as a religion. However, Rastafari is a way of life. Rastafari is life. It's a liberty. And so when people would have, in the earlier days, would have seen individuals who would have promoted and present themselves as Rasta, the system or the establishment would have gone out of its way in different ways of propaganda to marginalize deliberately. Because for the most part, the individual who identifies as Rasta by hailing Haile Selassie first as his king and his God connects with a past that they would hope we would forget. Now, let me just tie it together and I bring it full circle. We talk about discrimination in the workplace. The brother talk about his disabilities physically and the abuse he endures, and the sister talk about domestic violence. The thing is that as African people in our culture, it wasn't separate. We took care of our people. We took care of the elders and those who were disabled. They never had an issue. We never had an issue with women in domestic violence because we understood and we knew clearly that the woman is directly connected to the spiritual realm where we all come from. In fact, she is the portal. So there was no disrespect placed towards her, but we find that post-colonial. So my question is, who taught us to disrespect the woman? Where did that start? Who taught us to disrespect the elders and those with physical challenges, which we now call disabilities? Rastafari, the teachers of His Majesty, points in caring for each other, points in caring for the community, points in doing what's right within the system. Because the reality is, the system is the system. It's set. We already know that. I'm not here to fight the system. The system is what it is. What we're here to do as Rasta is to live our life according to the teachings of His Majesty, which is about us. It's about we, not a separate thing where you have people being marginalized, like you said, or women being abused, or the elderly. Let's take Barbados, for example. You answer the question, is Barbados government doing enough? The truth and the fact is domestic violence is rooted in the church. If you think about it, the Bible that we all taught as Christian society, where's the woman in the Bible? Where is she? And if she's even shown, she's shown as a harlot, she's shown as she should be quiet, she should be all the different stereotypes right in the Bible. And by the way, this is not a hit at the church or the Bible. That's not what it is. I'm simply saying that it's learned behavior. And when we talk about having programs to change these ideas, we also got to realize that every aspect of the society, from the church to the schools, especially the schools, we have to really start looking at ways to re-educate the people. We have to unlearn so much that we have been taught that we still hold on to. So it's not even about who's bringing in the bacon. Well, for me, it wouldn't be the bacon, it would be who bringing in the item. What I'm saying is that the family has to be restored. The family values has to be restored in order to resolve a lot of the issues we find that we are facing, especially as a people. Because although we could have different marginalized groups within a society, the reality is the African man is the most marginalized being in the entire world. No matter what country you go to, the human rights violations are mostly meted out against African people, period. So the reason why that happens, because you can't go to do that to Chinese government army come for you. You can't do that with the people down in Iran or the Palestinians at this point, because you pick one, you pick and all. But when it comes to us, we are so subdivided. It's a ridiculous thing. We have all these subcategories and areas and pockets and cliques and political movements and leave it at that. But my point is, and I'll say this before I pass over the mic, when it comes to Rastafari, even in terms of ganja, which is now known as cannabis, medicinal cannabis, men have lost their lives, families have been disrupted, there are men incarcerated right now, right in Dodge, having a spliff, when there are people looking to get licensed and promote it for a medicinal purpose, when in fact there's we Rastafaris who kept that going all these years. And even in Barbados now, I still can't grow some plants at my house, which is funny. You know, but what I'm saying is that society needs to be re-educated on a lot of things. And although I could say, yes, folk Rasta has been also marginalized significantly, the reality is it's a we thing. If we start looking at ways where we can really help build the nation as a whole and be honest about the issues that we have adopted and inherited in most cases and never questioned, then we can start making progress one step at a time, one step at a time.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn to Alexa Hoffman, who is a member of the transgendered community. And this is an issue the last few weeks that has been given a lot of attention in the media.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very controversial subject, the rights of persons who are LGBTQ+. Now, I'm not here to say we should not. I'm here to say, first of all, that we shouldn't judge anyone. Even if you don't understand it, Barbados is a place where, as we sit here, it has a constitution, it guarantees the right of freedom from freedom from discrimination. Also, I want to emphasize the fact that recently we had a High Court ruling in the Renee Holder McLean Ramirez case, which decriminalized same-sex intimacy. So that's no longer an issue. It's no longer illegal in Barbados. And that, going back to Mr. Emilio Barilla's point, a lot of these things are relics of colonialism. And that was the buggery law and same-sex intimacy criminalization laws were relic of colonial era. And the British have moved past this, but we clung so tightly to it. I want you to explain to us, what would you like to see the average man in the street? How would you like them to see them treat you when you are in public? I've known and followed your story for a number of years, the derogatory slurs that you've been a victim of, the cruelty many times. I remember once another transgendered individual, I had to represent them before the police complaints tribunal. That was another protracted case. Mm-hmm. What do you really want to let the public know about what it means to be a transgendered individual? And how would you like to be, how do you want to be treated by persons in Barbados?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start with the question of what it means to be transgender. Because there is a lot of confusion and totally avoidable confusion, in my opinion, on the subject. Speaking for myself, as long as I can remember, quite seriously, my entire life, and as I said, I'm about 30, I turn 30 tomorrow, I have always held a sexual and gender identity of being feminine, female, irrespective of what I may see in the mirror, irrespective of what may be on my ID card. When I look in the mirror and I look at myself and I, introspect myself and I reflect on who I am, it is always through a very feminine lens. And there has been little to nothing that could really make a dent in changing that. And I wouldn't want it changed for anything. I have understood that is me. That's how I see myself. And I present myself to the world as such. And in turn, my expectation of society is, even if you have a problem with understanding divergent gender identity and expression, at the very least, treat me with the same respect I would treat you. So whether it is, if say I'm working in an office, you come in and you need my assistance, the same way how I will render you my assistance to the best of my ability. When the shoe is on the other foot and I come into the office, render the best assistance that you possibly can to me. If it is that we're waiting in line, if I say, can you hold my space for a moment? I need to just pop back. Simple politeness. Respect costs you nothing. It doesn't have to be, and I don't see it as any undue hardship or any unreasonable demand to expect that from others. In fact, I was raised in a very pluralistic world. And what I mean by that is I have come across people from all walks of life, in terms of from different countries, different cultures, and so on. And I was always taught, with each person that you come across, treat them with the same respect that you would treat your mother, your father, your siblings, your aunts, your nephews, cousins, whomever. Same respect you'd treat your family and you'd want them to treat you with, treat the stranger that you come across. Even if it is that they behave in the most out of hand fashion. I mean, now as an adult, I decide, well, I can flip a coin and decide what kind of treatment you get at that point. But my default is, even if it is that you come at me sideways, you come at me in a backhanded manner, I'm still going to give you the benefit of the doubt and dismiss it as, okay, you're having a bad day. I am not going to add to that by being, untoward towards you in the way that you were towards me. So that is really to answer those two questions that you would have brought up. And also I want to touch and add on to what Melissa and Errol would have said in terms of prejudices being a homegrown, it's a learned something. Whether it is that you deliberately go to your way to teach your child to treat people in a particular manner, or if it is simply what they sit and hear. It's much like cursing. You don't necessarily have to teach your child the F word and what it stands for. They just hear you say it all the time. And after a while, they start to pick it up and they do it too without even thinking about it. Exactly. And they might not even have a clue as to what the words are coming out of their mouth. Likewise, if they see you every time you see, a trans woman walking down the road, an openly gay man with a handbag, or whatnot walking down the road, and the first thing out of your mouth is, to flirt with the invective, and you're screaming and shouting, or even picking up something to throw at them, or you want to charge at them with a weapon or something like that, the child is going to sit there and figure, oh, well, anytime I see somebody like that, I guess I have to behave the same way too. And that, unfortunately, is how we end up with cultures of bullying in schools. And that's something we really need to take seriously. We just figure, oh, the bullying is just give me a lunch money, X, Y, Z. No, it is the slurs in the classroom. Going to school, in primary school, even in secondary school, many a time a teacher had to stop a class to address a student who got unruly because they're walking past the classroom and they know that I'm in that classroom. So they started with maybe a Buju Banton lyric at the top of their lungs. You can't even hear the teacher, and as much as people think that, oh, well, we have certain religious mores and whatnot, part of my language, I don't give a damn about that. Your religious mores and whatnot are your mores, they're not mine. You may have Christian precepts. Suppose I'm Jewish. Suppose it were that I were Buddhist. Suppose I come from, and again, growing up in a pluralist, I've grown up around so many different religions, Muslim friends, Jewish friends. I was Christian, Anglican, and at one point studied with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I have come across so many different backgrounds, whether by myself or through interacting with others. And for the life of me, I cannot imagine how someone can feel good with themselves to want to engage in such a prejudicial manner to say, well, I see you trying to get a job and I'm going to make sure you can't take care of yourself. So I will always look you over for the position, no matter how qualified you are, or I'm just going to fire you without a word. And I'm going to make you duke it out before the Labor Department and the tribunal, or even as happened to me 5 years ago, hence the scar across my face, I have a problem with you. So I'm going to try to take your life and I'm going to leave you with scars that every time you look in the mirror, you remember what I did to you. And you have to live with that every day and deal with that. I can't see how anybody with a proper conscience can feel at ease with themselves to do that. So it is something that we really need to put some serious effort in as a society. And it starts at home. It starts not just in how you raise your children, but even as Michael Jackson sang, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. Start with the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror, the girl or boy in the mirror, the person in the mirror generally. Take a damn good look at yourself, how you may treat others, and be like, if the shoe were on the other foot, can I handle being treated in the manner that I just treated that person 10 minutes ago, or that person I used to pick on when I was a child? And once you can reach the point of, no, I need to do better, and you put that effort in, everything else, I'm not going to say it's going to come overnight because I'd be lying, but it becomes a lot easier taking one step at a time.
Yes, Mr. Emmanuel, you can pick it up from here.
Yes, appreciate. Thanks for sharing. It wouldn't be me if I sat here not responding to that, knowing me. Let me say, a lot of what you said has context, and again, and I will agree that it is a learned behavior, and in order to unravel it, we're going to have to you're knitting and you're going through, you're stitching and stuff, you're knitting, and you get that little loop you miss, you got to pull back and you got to pull it, and you got to unravel all you would have done to get back to that one in order to correct it. That's providing you want to correct it, because you can always try to double stitch and try to cover it up later on. My grandmother was a seamstress. Yeah, my grandmother, child, man. Love. Shout out to Aunt Rose, man. Let me say that, again, a lot of the issues that we as a people face are directly linked to the fact that we are hurt people. Because coming out of the post, there's a lady, I forgot her name, Dr. What's her name? Dr. Larry, I think her name is. She wrote a thing called post-traumatic slave syndrome. And coming out of the experience of enslavement, we as a people are sick. We are hurting. We've been hurting for generations. We pass this on, abuse, and hurt people continually hurt people. No matter how that's how it's going to be. if we do not recognize that we have to restore our family values as a whole, and yes, it does start with the individual, and it then goes from there to your family, then to your community, and then your nation. Unless we start resolving these things as one, we will always have little pockets of little scrimmages, and we'll never get this battle over with, because it'll be me today and you tomorrow. Spending thought in mud all the time. We never really making the progress that we really want to make. So holistically is the way we deal with this. Now, just to touch this briefly, and it's very delicate, so I'm going to tiptoe. There's such a thing as a feminine male. There's a masculine man and there's a feminine man. And that's just a reality. All men are not alpha masculine men. There's some men who are a bit feminine. And that's just a reality. It doesn't mean that you're still a man, just a feminine man. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's who you are. Now, for someone in society to look at you and marginalize you and insult you and all this other stuff, that's their ignorance. That's nothing to do with you. But if you accept the insults and the slurs, well, I suppose, yes, it can be psychologically have an effect on you, because, of course, that you call bullying, and how somebody, in terms of your own esteem, how you see yourself. Because people say all kinds of stuff about me all the time. It's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. And you got to start rebuilding, like you said again, I must commend you for that. It's about self, man. You got to know yourself. And once we get to the point where we can recognize as a people who are divinely connected with this land, the earth, and we have been damaged and hurt for centuries, unless we start healing from the core and then the family restoring those values, we will always have these challenges while everybody else is making progress going on. Because you look at society as a whole, you don't see they may have issues, but from a family standpoint, when we look at it, who are the most marginalized always? It's always us again. I mean, literally, it's always us. No matter where we go, we see that. You look at the Palestinians right now, not to bring it up, but to bring it up. We could talk a lot about Palestinians right now and the Israeli territory that they're currently occupying, prior to them coming there in 1940, whenever year it was, 7 or 8. Because prior to the Israeli and prior to the Palestinians as we know it now, it was us. You know, the Middle East is just Northeast Africa. The point is that we go so far back, but unless we start to look at how do we restore that which was taken, we will always have insults for each other, fight each other, disrespect for each other, women, men, adults, children, elderly. I saw an elderly video circulating a couple of days ago of some young men seemingly assaulted and taken. Again, where's that coming from? Where's that coming from? That behavior, that's what they call abnormal behavior. Abnormal behavior. People who love a society or love their family or see each other as family, they don't do that. That's considered abnormal. What are you doing? What are you doing? We don't practice like that. So I'm saying that a lot of these challenges when it comes to human rights, and like I said, I'm happy that you bring this topic to the conversation, because we talk about, yes, human rights, but what exactly are human rights? What's it really? I mean, we could read a book definition. Before they told us we had a human right, did we not know what our rights were? Did we not have a policy, a way of life that was striving for eons? So let's restore the first world order. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's see what we missed, where we went wrong in terms of our health. And that's another thing really quick. We can't heal as a people properly if we don't eat properly. If we eat sick food, we're going to become sicker people. And that's just a reality. You got to watch what you're eating. If we're talking about human rights and healing, we got to look at all these things. And to sum it up, education. Education. One of the biggest things about human rights is that you should never deprive a child or keep back a child from excelling to his capacity. The education system in Barbados is not designed, has never been designed, and is not in place to produce leaders. It's not broken.
No,
it's deliberately the way it is to produce servants for this plantocracy. They don't want free thinking people here. They don't want young women to be engineers, and that's a valid point. They don't want that. No, you're supposed to be domesticated, because at some point you have to serve. And the men, unless you are tamed well, you know, you're gonna have to sell Akis at the roundabout because we don't have no spot for you. And God forbid, well, not now so much because you can have locks in the system. But once upon a time, once upon a time, you get locks in the system. No, you're gonna have to shave that hair, big man. You're gonna get a Caesar. We all know who Caesar was, but we don't go down that road. The point I want to make before I pass off the mic is that family has to be restored, the family values, and that's how we deal with this human rights issue, not just in Barbados, but especially the Caribbean region, because you could pick anywhere in the world outside of Africa and probably South America, the Caribbean has been the most marginalized for as long as we can remember, sis, especially the women of the Caribbean. They have not even had their story told us yet, but it's coming because of platforms like this. And I want to thank you guys for that opportunity. Thank you.
I want to say that sitting here and listening to everyone, you know, we all face the same thing. The Rastafari is discriminated. Women are discriminated. The disabled is discriminated. And the transgender is discriminated. And you know, the discrimination is that the people, as my brother here said, is not educated about what is happening. Right? Now, you have to think, because for children and people in this country to follow the right road and to know what to do have to come from the leadership of this country. The leadership of this country is not pushing the right thing. And we have to look into that. Now, what I would like Dr. Yearwood and the executive of this party to do is to set up a committee within the party. Now I'm talking about my discipline. Set up a committee in this party to look out for persons with disability and see what they can do to improve the lives of persons with disability when they win the next government. We have to start now with inside the party before election calls, so that when you get there, you already have the framework in position. And also for women and for different cultures in Barbados. Before I go, I want to say that I told this party at annual conference that this auditorium was built because Errol Barrow wanted a place for culture in this country, where people can come and express themselves in culture. And that is why this auditorium was built, because they had no place in Barbados for groups to come and perform. And that is why this auditorium was built. That was one of his passions. And we need to get that out there so that we can get back culture within the young people in Barbados, so they would know their destiny, where they come from, and where they want to go.
I'm going to wrap up. We've been going almost an hour now. But I want to turn to this year's international theme for Human Rights Day, which will be held on December the 10th, which will be officially commemorated on December the 10th, which is this Sunday. Freedom, equality, and justice for all. What does this mean for you, and what would this look like for you in Barbados? I will start with Emmanuel, then I'll turn to Melissa, Mr. Errol Hurley, and then I will close with Alexa.
Yes, freedom, justice, and equality for all. Oh man, that sounds like a whole topic by itself. Well, and let's put it in a context then. Freedom, justice, and equality for all. You know, we talk of freedom, we talk of justice, we talk of equality. You know, although it sounds good as a theme, I don't even think the people who presented that as a theme fully even grasp what that really means. Because if you're going to deal with freedom, justice and equality, then there's a redress of grievance that is still pending with regards to reparation. Because there is still a redress of grievance, not true? And there's no discussion on how we're going to restore what was taken, restoration, and then reparation. So once we could have that conversation, then we could then really sit and talk about what that means in Barbados. So as a Rastafari, going back to Ayakobile Maloney again, and all who have endured discrimination at the hand of this government and any government in Barbados, reparation would begin at home then. I think that the governments of Barbados, all of them, owe Rastafari in Barbados a measure of freedom to exercise my rights in order to use my sacrament without prejudice or harassment. I think there's a level of justice that has not taken place yet. There's a lot of people who went missing. We ain't gonna call names, but I mentioned one already. And if we're gonna talk about equality, then wait a minute. As an individual who's recognized as indigenous by the International United Nations, then we want restoration, though, the land. We want our land, man. We want our land. We want land. We want the means to work those lands. The reparations would come in very handy in building our institutions, which is the school. Education is the biggest thing. Why can't we have the Rastafari school established? Shout out to the family in the Pine. I don't recall the name. The brother had passed away. He transitioned. But they had to fight to homeschool, which became the norm during COVID with no problem. We had to fight to get just to wear school at the time, although there's no law in Barbados that say you have to cover your hair as a Rasta going to school, but they insist that children cover their hair until recently because they want to allow other groups to cover their weave. Let me talk it, man. If we're going to be truthful, let's be truthful. What I'm saying is that what it means to me as an individual who is a Rastafari and I identify as such, it means that there's things that have not even begun to be discussed. And it's not even about sacrament and marijuana, what they, not even about ganja. This is way bigger than that. We should have our health institutions to take care of our people. We should have our own financial institutions. There's so much that needs to be restored. So freedom, justice, and equality for all those listening who's promoting and advocating for human rights. There's a number of discussions that need to be held here in Barbados with regards to restoration I won't even push too much reparation because we know that that's just a long ongoing conversation that just may never even see the end of day. I think our prime minister recently said is what, 4 trillion or something like that. She's quoted some number recently. Not sure if she worked that out, but the fact of the matter is, regardless of what the colonial people owe Barbados, Barbados owe Rasta a level of an apology and restoration and reparation for the marginalization of the people, the subjugation, the harsh treatment, the imprisonment. I mean, even up to now, I won't call it the enforcers, but the security enforcers. When you have locks and you go in certain establishments, you go to certain places, man, people look at you, automatically people follow you, because after all, you can't be up to no good. I'm not saying that there perhaps some who might be practicing and may not be doing right by the way of life, but they get Rasta a bad name. So they see everybody the same, although everybody's not the same. So when it comes to freedom, justice, and equality, if we're going to be truthful about it, then when it comes to Rastafari, there's a level of conversation that needs to be had. It needs to be had with a matter of urgency. If you're being truthful, Thank you for the opportunity, by the way, for being here. And
You're welcome.
hopefully it's the beginning of much to come.
Melissa.
Thank you. All right, so when we look at freedom, right, we want a society that, on the whole, that embraces the full potential of a woman. Full potential. And move away from you either too young or you're too old. So in between that you gotta be. So people say, "Oh no, you're too young," and then you got a very small window where you can operate in, and then after that you're too old, so you can't help, right? So move away from that, and inclusivity, not just as a goal but as a reality for women worldwide. Because in Barbados, again, we we just look at ourselves. But if we look at worldwide, there's women still struggling in the basic things that we have freedom in here and that we take for granted. And I think that all people in Barbados should be able to travel the world, even go to one other country to realize what we have here in Barbados. Maybe we don't realize what we have. And I would say freedom, free from discrimination, violence, and prejudice for all women. That's me in a nutshell. Over to you.
Mr. Errol Hurley.
When I heard the topic, I laughed within myself. Freedom. Let me go to the United States. You remember a law was just passed in the United States that a woman can't have an abortion if it is to kill her. Now you imagine that. That is taking away your rights. You know, I heard in the news this morning of a lady in Texas, and her name is Cox too, that went to the High Court to get it passed that she can go and get her abortion because it is threatening her health. And you know, the governor of Texas said that if any doctor at all do the operation, he's going to make sure that they get 99 years in prison. You imagine that? And that is what we have to go through, right? And that is why we in Barbados should be happy with what little we have. Because I can't say we have a big lot. What little rights we have here. Because Black people and Hispanics and Jews that live in the United States, their rights are being trampled on morning, noon, and night. It's being taken away from them by the radical left. Sorry, the radical right. Lord Joe Biden, forgive me. The radical right in the United States want to take away the rights from all Americans who don't support Trump. And that is what we have to live with. And whenever America sneezes, we catch the cold down here. So whatever happened in America when it comes to human rights, Barbadians, look out. You never know, it might be in the pipeline coming down here too. But it just off Culpeper Island coming. You know, so we have to be very careful with what we do and how we look at things in this country. And I put it in a nutshell. We now have a lot of work to do to make human rights in this country something that we can be proud of. And I might dead and go long, and I can tell you, it ain't gonna get there yet because so much obstacles are in the way, blocking it. People here in Barbados are blocking things that should make us happy because they want it for their self-preservation and not for people who work for them or who live with them. Because children and adults are treated so disgracefully in this country. And we can talk all night here about it. But I want to leave this with you, that there was a situation with a person with a disability that family used to had them living in a shed in the yard because they didn't want their friends to see that they had a child with a disability. Had them living in the yard in a shed, bed and everything out there, and a TV. Could only come into the house when their friends gone. And that is a family that was doing that to their own. And that is why we have to educate people. Because I don't know if some of you remember when I was a boy growing up, children that were autism. You know what they used to call them? Mongols. Mongols. And they used to hide them in the house. But now, thank God, because of education within the disabled community by a lady by the name of Patricia Padmore Blackman, who is the president of the Association for Parents with Children with Disability, educating parents on how to handle their children. And I want to say kudos to her. And people are now being educated that bring out your children. Let them come out, let them play. Don't hide them. Don't hide persons with disability, children or adults. Bring them out. And all of you who have a family that have a person with a disability, let them come out and experience the free world. Thank you.
Yes. Again, powerful points across the board here. In terms of freedom, justice, and equality for all, let me start on the equality part. For me, I personally think equality isn't the right word. It's more equity, the fairness of it. Because it is, when you say equality, yes, everybody gets everybody gets a chance and everybody gets the same thing. But it misses the important part of who needs how much. Who is getting enough, who is getting too much, who isn't getting enough. And I always think of that, is a funny little infographic cartoon split in two with equality and equity, with the three people trying to see over the fence, and they each get crates to stand on. And in the case of equality, everybody gets one crate. There's someone who can already see over the fence and they don't need it. And there's a kid who, even with the one crate, still can't see over. But then with equity, the person who doesn't need a crate doesn't get one. The person who needs a crate but not a lot gets just enough that they can see over. And the person who's the shortest gets as many as is needed that they can see over and observe what's going on. So that is what comes to my mind when I think of equality for all. I more modify it to equity for all. And then freedom and justice, of course, freedom being you are free to navigate society. You can make friends, you can build relationships, you can network, you can, go wherever you need to, the store, school, work, the beach, and nobody's to harass you or stop you from going there unless, of course, you've been convicted of an offense and you go to jail, in which case you can't go wait till you finish your sentence. But once you have paid your debt to society, you are again free to go wherever you want, insofar as you're not making trouble for others. And on that point, in terms of justice, being able to get adequate and timely justice. I remember reading a couple of weeks ago how a number of complaints are being made against judges before the Bar Association, because it is months, if not years, before cases are heard. Even I am having, some situations where it's been years since I would have filed my paperwork. The other side hasn't, submitted anything. And it's like pulling teeth just to try to get the powers that be to get a move on. Because as long as it is sitting there languishing, justice delayed is justice denied. And so it is important that, as we think about human rights, especially at this time of International Human Rights Day, and it's not just one day of the year, it's something that should be on our minds year round. Because in whatever, life has situations where our human rights come in. Life itself is a testament to our right to life, to be able to breathe and wait to see the next sunrise. And so for me as a transgender individual, being able to navigate society in any context, whether it is, again, work, school, housing, friendships, social life, whatever, being able to navigate that without undue interference. Let me emphasize that, undue interference. And if it is that someone does cause me interference or hardship, that I have the appropriate means to seek redress and I can seek it in a timely fashion. And that once I receive that redress, it is fair. It is not that I get to be as heavy-handed as I want and crush the person that ticked me off. And it's not that the other person gets a slap on the wrist and I'm here like, I went through all that for this. So being able to access my human rights and have them protected in the manner that they each need to be protected, depending on the situation and what is going on. So that's pretty much what comes to mind.
Okay. I thank everyone for attending today. It's very useful, a very interesting discussion. I want to reemphasize that the Democratic Labour Party is here to listen to you. And this is only the beginning of this conversation we're going to be having across Barbados with all communities within Barbados. I want to mention Ms. Felicia Dujon, Mr. Matthew Thorne, members of the Democratic Labour Party, who assisted in organizing this event. They were supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, everyone is around the LP after a very busy week. We are sick or exhausted, and I am fighting through the cold myself. I'm so glad I came today. Yes, I'm really very happy with the turnout we had today and the responses. Also, I've been making notes of all of the suggestions that have been coming up as the Democratic Labour Party is the government in waiting. So we've made notes of your suggestions. I'm very grateful that Mr. Stephen Blackett, our wonderful General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party, and our very, very hard-working General Secretary is here today. And I know he's going to act upon all of these suggestions and he's going to bring this up in the General Council. And Mr. Hurley, who has a very, very powerful and moving testimony. I promise you that we will set up a committee to look out for persons with disabilities and women and different cultures in Barbados. But I will make a particular emphasis and effort to set up a committee within the Democratic Labour Party to look at persons living with disabilities and how we can better respond to their challenges. I thank everyone for coming out today. And this has been another edition of The Front House. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
I wanted to say